Hi, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Paul Woolery, and I'm a member of Hood River Soaring. I'm wearing some of our logo clothing here, the hat, the shirt. And Hood River Soaring is a local glider club that makes the sport of soaring more accessible by sharing the cost of equipment and all the expenses that go into flying gliders. And just so I have a good sense of it, how many people here are local? Would you raise your hands if you live here locally? Okay, and the rest are not. So I'm going to be showing some pictures here of the Hood River Valley area, and I just want to make sure that if you have questions, those of you who are not local, just to help you get oriented, just speak up, all right?
Do you consider Portland local?
No, because this is really specifically about the Hood River Valley.
Fine.
So if you're familiar with the landmarks in the valley, that'll help. So I've been flying gliders for 10 years, and I only fly gliders. I have a private pilot certificate to fly gliders. Never flown a power plane. And I got started late in life. I was 59 when I started taking lessons. And it was actually just kind of a lark. I had not really thought about flying particularly. I think when I was maybe 15 and 16, I sort of had the bug. That really wasn't going to go anywhere because I couldn't possibly afford it. So when I was 59, I could, and I went for a ride, just a glider ride, and the pilot said, "Hey, I'm a commercial pilot. I'm an instructor, and I want to learn to do this. We can get started tomorrow." And so I said yes, and I started learning to fly gliders, and that was all here in Hood River. And so I've flown at this point, about 200 hours here in the Hood River Valley, and the rest of my flying has been in some other areas around the western United States. But I love flying here, and what I'm going to be talking about today is specifically about the soaring conditions here in Hood River. And for those of you who would be interested, I'll also be speaking some about just the basics of how soaring works, the atmospheric conditions that we depend on. In fact, it would be good to know, those of you who are here, for whom would it be kind of the whole idea of soaring, gliding, how it works is new to you? A couple of you back there, okay? And the rest of you have some knowledge of how the basics of soaring works, okay? So interesting for me when I started learning is that I really, like I said, it was a total lark, and I didn't really know anything about gliding and how soaring worked. I started reading the little primer that my instructor told me to read, and I started to learn some basics, but it wasn't until I'd been actually probably into it for 3 or 4 months that I really got to experience my first real soaring experience. Because up until then, my instructor had been taking me up onto an area we call the ridge, and actually, excuse me just a moment, let me orient you just a little bit here. So we'll back up just a moment to say this is looking at the Hood River Valley from down at the south end of the valley. So you're looking north. Whoops. Stephanie.
Yeah.
Can you turn off it seems to be moving on its own. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it was me. Maybe I'm not touching it right. But if you put it to that's the picture we want.
Okay.
Okay, we want it to stay there. Okay, so we're looking north, and you can see the Columbia River up there at the top of the screen. And notice over toward what it changed again. So it must be on some kind of.
Are you hitting when you try to hit the laser pointer?
I'm not touching anything.
Okay.
I'll set it down. Okay. Actually, I do want to be able to point.
Yeah, so I unplugged that.
Let me see if I can point.
You're good.
Oh, there it goes again. It must be on you can turn off the slideshow.
I got it. Keep going.
Okay. So, here we go. Here you see what we call the ridge. The ridge north and the south ridge. Oh, there it goes again. And most of the flying that I've been doing, my instructor had been taking me up to along the ridge, and we've just been going back and forth, back and forth. And honestly, I didn't really even understand at that time about ridge lift all that well. I didn't know that much about why we were staying up. I was just learning how to work the stick and the rudder together and deal with the fact that, we were going every which way. I'd never been in any kind of vehicle that could pitch up and down, roll back and forth, yaw left and right. It could do all of that, and just to get the idea of how to sort of get control of all that was challenging enough. So as I was getting to learn this, my instructor took me up on a day that obviously he knew was a great soaring day. And we towed up about 2,000 feet, and we got off here at the ridge. And it was kind of a cloudy day, very cloudy in fact, and there was just a little kind of blue streak between the clouds that ran from Mount Hood up toward Mount Adams. And we kept climbing and climbing, and we climbed up above the clouds into that beautiful blue river of that blue sky. And we got up to about 12,000 feet and flew over to Mount Adams and turned and flew back over to Mount Hood. And I thought, oh my God, I didn't know that this is possible. So this is soaring. I mean, I was just so naive. I had no idea. So anyway, it's 10 years later now, and now I know how to do that by myself. And I've learned how to fly in the Hood River Valley and how to get into the different kinds of lift that make an amazing flight like that possible. And so I'm going to describe that to you and tell you what I've learned about basically the soaring conditions in this area and how it works. So gliders depend on atmospheric conditions, the energy in the atmosphere to fly, and that's basically heat and moisture. The heat from the sun combined with moisture, which can help, creates all of the atmospheric conditions, the wind and the thermal lift that combine to make it possible to fly a glider and keep it up in the air all day long. And here in the Hood River area, we have three kinds of lift that we depend on. And the primary one is ridge lift. And that's why my instructor was taking me over to the ridge all the time. What we have here is we have a prevailing west wind. The winds are blowing out of the west. That's almost most days we've got wind coming out of the west here. And the wind blows up against the ridge. And now, Stephanie, I'd like to move to the ridge image.
Not that one?
Yeah, this
That
one. So we've turned 90 degrees here. North is over to the left now. And now we're looking at the ridge. This is what we call the North Ridge. It's the upper end of the valley. And it, it's pretty simple. The wind blows against the ridge. Creates an updraft, and you just take the glider over there and you catch that updraft, and you can fly all along the ridge. And the ridge starts here at what we call the notch at about a little under 2,000 feet and gradually climbs as it progresses south. And you can just go along there and just climb up above the ridge, just riding that ridge lift all the way. And the great thing about the Hood River Valley is that, first of all, we have this lift most of the time, and it's very consistent. When it's working, you can depend on it. So it doesn't just suddenly die. If you go up on a day when there's ridge lift at noon, it's likely going to be even better at 2 in the afternoon, maybe better still at 4. And if it starts to die down as the day progresses, it dies down gradually. And what that means is, back up here. So we're going to back up to the that one, hold it there. What that means is when there's just ridge lift working, you can get off here. We fly out from the airport, which is right here. We fly over typically to the notch. We usually often get off here. And then we can fly along the ridge and get higher and higher, sometimes up to about 5,000 feet above the ground. And keep coming on down, flying on down here, enjoying all that beautiful ridge lift. And the ridge ends here, at least this part of the ridge does. But then we can do what we call work our way around the corner here, and then there's another ridge. So if you show the Parkdale, now we come down into the Parkdale Valley. And where we were right going around that corner right there, and the glider comes around here, and now we've got a whole other ridge. It takes us all the way down here, and when we're at this point here, Mount Hood's over about here. So we're up real close to Mount Hood. It's a real spectacular place to be. And also, the ridge has gotten higher and higher. So here at Shell Rock Mountain, the ridge is at about 4,000 feet. And the wind's still blowing, and the glider's up above Shell Rock Mountain at about 5,000 feet here. And if we start to get a little bit low, we just work our way back, just follow the ridge all the way back to the airport. And that's one way you can really enjoy soaring here in Hood River Valley, is just flying along the ridge. Cover a lot of area, beautiful country, gorgeous down below. And like I say, the ridge lift is very dependent. But that's not all there is to it, because there's two other kinds of lift that we work with here. And so let's go back to the slide of the other one. There we go. What's that one called? It doesn't matter. You know that. We'll call it the main valley. The valley, okay. So, two other kinds of lift, and I'm going to describe those and then show you how they all work together. So in addition to ridge lift, which is just simple convection of wind being pushed against the ridge, you can just picture that updraft. It's real easy to picture. The other kind of lift that we depend on is thermal lift. And that's simply when a mass of air gets heated close to the ground by the sun just warming the ground, and then that air starts to rise. And as it does, it brings up air below it. And that thermal lift, the air rising, depending on atmospheric conditions, if they're right, will keep going higher and higher and higher. And whereas on the ridge lift, you're kind of limited to maybe getting 2,000 to 3,000 feet above the ridge at the most. When you got thermal lift mixed in there with it, the thermal lift can take you much higher. And with thermal lift, you can get up 10,000 feet. Just circling, just like an eagle or a vulture. You can picture a hawk circling in thermals. That's exactly what the glider does. We find that lift, usually you can feel it, and often you look for a cumulus cloud with a black underbelly. You get under that cloud, and then you feel that lift start to lift the glider up, and you bank a wing, and then you just start turning and turning and circling just like a glider, climbing right up to the cloud base. And some days you just find it even though there's no clouds at all. You go higher and higher. And so thermal lift is another form of lift that's here in the Hood River Valley. Other parts of the country have even stronger thermal lift than we have here, and those are areas that heat up more, like desert areas like out in Idaho, Nevada, Arizona. Terrific thermal lift. Our thermal lift here is not always dependable like the ridge lift. And then there's the third kind of lift, and this is the best of all. And that's called wave. And wave, the best way to think of wave is to picture what happens in a shallow stream where water is flowing downstream and it's flowing over rocks. And where there's a rock underneath the water, from the surface you can see a standing wave there. It just stands there. The water's flowing, but the wave doesn't move. It's just standing there because it's being created. And often when that first wave is created, then it keeps kind of rippling on downstream for a ways and gradually dissipates. The very same phenomenon is going on in the air, only we can't see it. It's invisible because it's the way air is. But same kind of thing. And here in the Hood River Valley, we have mountains to the west of us that work just like those rocks in the stream. And when there's a good strong wind coming out of the west at high elevation, particularly when the jet stream is overhead, what it will do is it will produce a wave formation that flows right into the Hood River Valley. And you can get into that wave, you can catch that wave here in the valley and keep going higher, right up to what is our legal limit of 18,000 feet. And the remarkable thing about waves is, again, if you picture that standing wave in the stream and how it just stays there, it doesn't move even though the water's flowing. Understand the same thing's going on in the air. So when you get into a wave up in the air, you can trust it's going to stay right where it is, and you can kind of find the line of that wave. You can just cruise along that line. And that's how my instructor, that first time, took us all the way to Mount Adams and back to Mount Hood. We were just riding the wave the whole way. All the way from Mount Adams to Mount Hood and back. A friend of mine just recently made that trip twice in one day. All the way to Mount Adams, turned around, back to Mount Hood, turned around, back to Mount Adams, came back to Mount Hood again. Just riding on this wave. The whole time he was at about 10,000 feet above the ground, and it just stayed there the whole way. So the way this all works together is, on a good soaring day here in Hood River, you start out at the airfield. We get towed up, we get towed over here to the ridge. Get off here at the ridge, maybe 3,000 feet above the ground. Well, 3,000 feet above the airfield, I should say. And here at the ridge, start looking for lift. And if the ridge is working, you're going to get up, like I said, a couple thousand feet above the ridge. But if it's also a day where there's some thermal activity, that thermal activity is going to help you get a little higher too, because the ridge is working and then there's some thermals in there, and maybe you're getting up 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet, which is high enough to start to find the wave. And if it's a day where there's wave, and the wave is coming from way out here in the west and it's flowing into the valley here, when you get up high above the ridge and you get into a certain point, catch the wave. And it's just an indescribably ecstatic experience. And here's the reason why. Ridge lift and thermal lift is usually kind of bumpy. When those thermals are working and the ridge is working, it's because of wind and the energy of a thermal. I mean, a thermal's pretty energetic, and it's like a little cyclone, you're catching. And those things they're energetic, they're bumpy. I mean, part of learning to fly a glider is just really getting used to just getting knocked around. You're sitting in there holding onto the stick, and some days it's not it's like that. But you get excited by it because hey, this is working. And you get used to it. I mean, I remember when I was first starting to learn the thermal, and I'd bank the glider over at 45 degrees, and the wind's like knocking me like this, and I'm trying to hold it steady and keep everything just right and circle and do all that. It was a little unnerving. I'd do 3 or 4 turns, and I'd have to pull out and just catch my breath. But gradually, I get more and more used to that. And so, it's not always that strong, but some days it sure is. And also it depends on what kind of glider you're flying. But as you're going up, catching that ridge wave and getting up higher with the thermals, getting up 5,000, 6,000 feet, and if you're lucky, it's one of those days when the wave is there. You catch into the wave, and suddenly everything changes. Because the wave is perfectly smooth. And that's one of the ways you know that you've transitioned into the wave, is that suddenly all that bumpiness, all that energy smooths out. And the glider just is lifting, it's climbing up higher and higher, and it's as smooth as silk. I mean, how many people here have flown in wave? Got one, two. It's why people get addicted to flying gliders. You get up into that wave and experience the feeling of that, and it's like you've gone to heaven. It's just the most wonderful feeling. And the effort, and you can continue to thermal in it and go higher and higher and higher, and it's practically effortless. You get to just sort of practice by the book thermaling now without having to deal with any bumpiness. And then, as I said, the wave is often very stable. So you get up into it, and now you can go anywhere. And so my own experience so far is I've been able to fly up close to Mount Adams, turn around, fly right up close to Mount Hood, and then also head on over to the river and then just follow the river west and go as far as Stevenson, flying west along in the wave. And the whole time, maybe lose 1,000 feet, get it back. There's something remarkable about getting up into the wave is that most days when you're up there, it's everywhere. You get up there and you can just stay up. You can stay up for as long as you want. And the typically good wave day, the real challenge is getting down. We come back and maybe it's been up for 2 or 3 hours, and usually for me that's kind of my personal limit. I'm ready to get back down on the ground. And then just figuring out, okay, how am I going to get the glider down? What method am I going to use? And usually what I like to do is I like to just point the nose down, fly it real fast, do some turns, go out over Hood River and kind of show off. People see the glider up there and they see it flying real fast and they see it making turns. It's fun to do that, and just pushing the nose down and flying fast and gradually bring it down, and you get down below the wave. Suddenly sometimes you're back into that thermal activity again, and it's kind of bumpy again. And then bring it on back and land it, and that's a good day of soaring in the river.